only for one marriage, children, love for a lifetime. He works, the Bible told us what families are. So why would we think that only those perfect families are the ones that are capable of being used? I'm trying to communicate that to my own. Which church are you with? Which one? Okay, yeah.
That's right.
Funny. There's a staff family that lives on Gooch.
Okay,
I said, no, that's a.
let's wind back up a little bit.
Hang your hat on. Gooch.
You got an outline there. We're going to kind of jump into wherever that outline picks up, and we'll try to cover some things and talk through what. Again, my objective in that exercise this morning was to help you feel it. Just kind of jump into their shoes a little bit. And you know what? I would consider it a grand slam if you walked out of here with that feeling and just had a little more compassion, a little more empathy, and used that empathy to enter the world of the kids and families that you're dealing with. I think one of the biggest mistakes we make is stepping back from people's complex lives and just kind of standing back going, man, I don't know about that. I don't know what to do about that. I don't know how to enter that, and then doing nothing. My family's been through a tremendous loss, and I can tell you that 9 out of 10 people run from us instead of stepping into our pain. And it's really hard to see that and experience that. And so I would encourage you to take that empathy that you have and use it. Step into a kid's world and say something like, man, if I were you, I think I'd feel stuck between your parents. Do you ever feel that? And if you're wrong, and any particular kid doesn't feel that, they'll tell you, no, it's not that. It's more like this. Well, great, you just got what they do feel. But if they do say, oh, yeah, man, it's stuck, then all of a sudden you've kind of joined them in a space that they normally don't get to talk to anybody about. One of the big things that, again, I want you to take away is the size of the lost suitcase, the baggage there, the fact that it's always with them, and the bucket, an emotional bucket's always getting filled up with stuff. And normally they don't know who to talk to about any of that. Can't talk to mom about it because it's somehow indicting towards mom. That this is somehow you're responsible for this, or you have a part in this. Can't talk to dad about it because it's the same thing. He's going to feel guilty. I don't want him to feel bad. That I don't. And it's just a hard thing for them to talk to. Well, then if they talk to grandma, then again it's almost like taking sides. They end up with, I don't know who to talk to about it. I don't talk to anybody. I talk to my friends. I might post something derogatory on Facebook every now and then, but I'm not really engaging anybody around this stuff. Having a neutral person is golden sometimes for kids. Somebody to just unload it. Not that you're going to have every answer. We don't have to have all the answers. But just sharing the load a little bit. That's a pretty substantial thing. So let me just back up and maybe recap what maybe you've just seen. Here's plan A. Okay? If you're driving God's plan for the family, it's like driving a Volvo. It's got the best crash rating. You can hit it from the top, the side, the back, and you are enclosed in a cage, and you're probably going to be pretty protected, and everybody inside that family is connected in a very similar way. It's got 4 wheels. It's pretty good. If you're driving a single-parent family, all right, it's missing a wheel, so that profoundly changes the balance and how it curves and how it handles bumps in the road. But it's still got a cage, and you're enclosed. But it is more vulnerable to impact, right? But everybody's enclosed, right? Driving a step family is a little bit like this, right? Because there's a lot of things that are missing. You've kind of lost that biological connection. You're regaining that. You're building that. As relationships develop, you strengthen, you build the cage. But initially on day one, it's a little bit like, as a matter of fact, if I think about it, once you add all the people, it's maybe driving this. Now notice, if one of those gymnasts decides they don't want to be on, what happens to the balance of the whole thing? So all you need is one teenager with an attitude. And you can tip it pretty quickly. And actually, here's the deal. It's not just what goes on inside the house for step families, what is anywhere connected. So it can be an ex-spouse who is the constant tug creating stress for this family. And it just rocks them. And they're pretty vulnerable to shakiness, right? So the divorce rate for couples in step families is 2/3. But I believe very strongly, that's what we're doing here at Family Life Blended, is if we give them good support, we build them into a community, we give them good information about how to balance and harmonize all the parts. I really believe strongly that 80% of couples in step families can do exceedingly well. And we can cut that divorce rate down tremendously. They just need somebody to teach them how to balance, right? They just need a coach, right? So that's kind of what we try to do around here. So maybe that gives you a visual to hang on to. We talked about God's plan A and how it's different. There's a lot of single-parent families in the world. I love this photo. This was Facebooked to me by a woman who was driving down a highway in Florida behind his car and snapped it and sent it on. Open position. 37% of families in the U.S. are single-parent families. When you're conceptualizing your ministry, I sure hope you are taking that into consideration. I hope that you're not, it affects everything, guys, from the scheduling to the cost to the, we're recruiting people to work in our children's ministry and teach Bible class. Again, it's that 2 times a year where we plead with the congregation to be a volunteer. And we look at the single parent and say, please be a volunteer. Well, then, how many back-end things are you doing to help that person be a volunteer? They want to be a volunteer. They want to give back, but they got kids, and it's all on them. So what, are you going to provide child care for their kids? Are you going to help pick up and drop off? And, all of a sudden you just start thinking about, if I'm in their shoes, what does that mean for me? And I think it begins to influence a lot of things. 4 attitudes of single parents. Again, these are kind of high-level, big-picture kinds of attitudes, but let's just walk through them. One is, I can't do anything. And that's the defeated and really depressed single parent. They're in a really difficult place. And it's just hard, and they tend to withdraw. You won't see them at church very much. I'll do it or die. That's the determined. I'm not going to drop the ball. My kids are not going to suffer because of what's going on. I'm going to do everything. I'm surviving, kind of hanging on by a thread, emotionally up and down. You're not always sure which person you're going to be dealing with when you make a phone call or when you engage that single parent, or I'm doing my best. They realize that all parents make mistakes, even parents in biological 2-parent homes, right? They just have a healthy perspective, and they're doing what they can. They recognize some limitations, but they're managing, and they're doing a pretty good job. A couple of observations for you. The first parent is probably not at church very much, and access to them is very, very, very difficult. Their kids have few boundaries, and in the hurt, the kids are acting out because they're just kind of looking for somebody to pay attention because their parent's not really available to them to pay attention. And so you kind of get that acting out stuff, that cry for help. The second parent appears to be on the outside to be fine. They're the ones, I'm going to do it or die. They just look like they've got it going and everything's great. They volunteer, they show up at every activity, they make sure their kids are at every place. But in reality, they need somebody to put an arm around them and go, okay, how you really doing? Third parent is erratic and chaotic. The kids don't know which household they're going home to after they've been at the other home. The first 3 are pretty vulnerable to a new romance, quick love, making poor decisions about new relationships, cohabitation, all those kinds of things. They're just needing somebody. But all 4 of them need a supportive unit around them. And that really kind of brings me to, okay, so what do we do as a church? So let me just kind of try to share some practical things that we can do in ministry to single parents. Number 1, this comes from work by Dennis Frank, by the way, who wrote the book Reaching Single Adults. It's just kind of a nice overview outline of some things. Provide respite. Give them time away from kids and demands. Now, what does that mean? Is that, we have date night out Well, what if you're not married? Do you get to go to be? It's that same concept, right? We're going to try to pull you away from life and just try to treat you a little bit. Anytime we can do that, night out, social gatherings, time alone, provide for the kids, give that parent a time to re-energize, get connected to people that encourage them and they can encourage. It doesn't seem like a lot, but man, that really can be helpful. Provide role models for their kids. That's the big brother, big sister kind of concept is something we can do within churches. Mentoring is essentially what that is. So a single mom who's got a young man in her household, and she's would love for a man to come alongside and just kind of be a big brother to that kid. If you can orchestrate those kinds of connections, and I don't mean you have to have the formal program where you sign up and you commit to, but just more like, hey, Charlie, man, would you mind looking in on this kid a little bit? And Charlie's a great guy, and he's got a little time on his hands, and he'd be willing to do that. Just that kind of fostering connections. Yes, if you have a formal big brother, big sister kind of program, that's pretty cool too. But sometimes I think in ministry, at least I remember these days, where somebody would come up with a great idea, and my first thought was, oh, man, okay, by the time we get all that orchestrated, and then we have to promote it, and then we have to build walls around it, and then we have to, the structure of the ministry gets overwhelming, and you end up not doing it. Well, sometimes just make it simple, and just do something without having to create all that. Adoptive family is kind of similar to that, where you're connecting families, single-parent families, a two-parent family, or other single-parent families connecting to one another, and what they're doing is they're just supporting each other, taking each other in and living life together. I think one of the big mistakes we make in ministry is we silo people. And, that's not the way it works in the world. It's just not the way people live life. And so, it's great if you have a single parenting group. Wonderful. But don't feel like you have to always segregate the single parents. Maybe you have some opportunity for them to have their small group where they're just with their single parents and they're just talking about single parent stuff. But you're also trying to foster connections with other families so that they're in connection with others. And again, why is that? Well, it tends to support each other. Single parents have more in common with parents than they do with singles. That's a clear distinction. Don't put your singles and your single parents together. They're not living in the same world. They have more in common with parents than they do with singles. And so move them in those directions, and that kind of helps everybody out a little bit. One guy told me recently, I was talking with him, he worked with singles and single parents in a large church in Southern California. And he said what they've really discovered is that even singles in a small group with married couples has far more longevity and far more spiritual maturing than just singles all by themselves, segregated out. What's that all about? Well, it makes sense, right? Singles are interested in marriage. They're interested in being around things regarding relationships and studying and talking about those things. Married couples, and then when singles get married, so now they've graduated out of the singles program, and so they have to leave all their friends, and you got all this rejection, abandonment stuff going on, and now they have no place to go to. But if they're already connected with other married couples, they just stay in this small group. It's not leaving and finding. It's now just still there. So the married couples provide some kind of perspective for the singles, but the singles then engage with and become assets to the married couples and kind of engage them. And all of a sudden he said that's working far better than anything else. They do the same thing with their single parents, connected with other families. Number 4, organize resources, fill the gaps. And this is just some of the practical things that go along that are supportive to single parent families. The financial stuff, if the money's short, and it can be very tight, one income households, clothing exchanges. If you're going on a retreat or an activity and you're inviting families to go, think through, how do we scholarship the single parent families? The car, home maintenance kinds of things. We've got 5 guys that are going to come up to the church on Saturday, and you can get your oil changed, and they'll do it for nothing, or they'll do it for $10 or whatever that is. And you just kind of, pull people together to help support some of the things that normally a 2-parent household would be able to take care of. Number 5, fellowship and education. Again, connected to community in a church context. And then the education part is, there's a variety of topics. There's a lot of different things that that you would want to spend time talking about. And my wife and I ran our single parent group for 3 years. A lot of that was driven by what their needs were, what they were interested in talking about. But then we would go through a single parent training, and we'd talk about being a parent. We'd talk about grief. You got a suitcase that you're carrying around, a grief, sadness, and your kids have a really big one. How do you enter their world? How do you talk through that? There's different resources and things that are available, so you can see some of those possible topics. The last one there talks about co-parent relationships. And again, that looks at, think of our demonstration, ex-spouses, the kids moving between homes. What do we do with that hurt rope between me and my ex? And how do we manage our parenting together as a team? One of the big ironies of divorce is you have to learn how to be good parents in your divorce in ways that you sometimes couldn't be when you were married. And that's a really challenging task. But it's important because of all the overall mood and how it affects the kids. Here's a video clip from the movie One Fine Day starring George Clooney. Watch the couple. Notice how their argument starts as a parenting issue but becomes an old marital junk issue. That's a pretty common thing to occur. But then what I really want you to notice is the kid being caught in the middle.
I don't even think I knew her. No. I think she's lying to you. I divorced her. She's probably going to leave me.
Hi, Jack.
Dad! Hi, Dad!
Hey, you maggot, you. Watch your step.
Maggie, be careful.
I do it all the time,
Does
Mom.
all the time.
I can't believe you still haven't gotten your plumbing fixed, Jack.
So what's up, Kristen?
Well, you know that me and Greg got married last Saturday.
Oh, yeah, how's Greg?
He's downstairs waiting in the car, waiting with an ulcer, hoping you'll say yes. I need you to watch Maggie for me.
Okay, yeah, I can do that till about 6. Would that help?
Well,
For the whole week, Daddy. The whole week.
we were scheduled to leave this morning on our honeymoon, but the nanny called to say that she's got to go watch her mother have a benign tumor removed in
Right.
Ohio. Greg's parents are too old. Mine are too crazy. Yours are dead. The tickets are non-refundable. So that leaves you.
Kristen,
Please,
no,
Jack,
yes,
do
I would
this,
love to.
please.
But, I'm working on a story right now, so.
You're always working on a story.
Well, yeah, it's what I do.
It's the same old one about an every other weekend good time father to whom responsibility is a dirty word.
Here's a hint, Kristen. During an attempted manipulation, like the one that's in progress, I would have gone with flattery.
Why do I always have to be the grown-up while you always get to be the little
Because in
boy?
the beginning of the relationship, when we were choosing up sides, you chose grown up first. This is how you really want it, Kristen.
No, what I really want is just once for you to make a sacrifice in your career for your daughter.
I'd like to.
She really wants to be
Come
with
here,
you,
little.
Jack.
Come on, come here, my little noodle, my little creature.
Yeah, okay. So it starts out as a parenting dilemma. Can you take care of Maggie for me? And that's the way it starts. I mean, there's a lot of genuineness in co-parents and how they're trying to deal with the other household, the other person. And it starts out there. But when there's a little frustration involved and disappointment involved, that resurrects the frustration and disappointment that I felt when we were married. And that takes me back to the time and the place when you did so-and-so and such and such. And all of a sudden, what is a parental issue becomes a personal issue, and the old marital junk gets resurrected, and now they're fighting and arguing. And what happens to the child? Right? You saw her demeanor. She begins to go within herself. She gets depressed. She gets sad. And it takes a toll on her. It's throwing rocks in her bucket. There's an old African proverb that says, when two elephants fight, it's the grass that suffers. Yeah, so kids get caught in the middle of the battle, and they suffer, and it's hard. So anytime we teach and train and help single parents understand that, what can you do, what can you not do, what's within your power, that whole co-parenting piece, that is children's ministry. I mean, if you think systemically about the family, that's significant children's ministry and youth ministry. And you're not dealing with the kid. You're dealing indirectly with the kid because you're equipping their parents to have peace. which makes life easier for them to move back and forth, which lowers the rocks, which, over time significantly decreases the burden for them. That's really important stuff. Significant ministry. Couple of my resources deal with, in some level, deal with the co-parenting issues. One of the best resources that's available is written by Tammy Daughtry. It's called Co-Parenting Works, with an exclamation point. Co-parenting can work, in other words. And it's appropriate for single-parent families and step-families where children are moving back and forth between homes. And so I might recommend that to you. Let me just say something about, what about households where the biological parent is deceased and the children are not moving back and forth between homes? There is still very much a presence, right? That presence goes on. That parent is still in the heart and the mind and the soul of that child. And so even though we don't change homes, I still am very loyal to my dad. I'm very loyal to his memory, to what he stood for, what he taught me, and how I feel about him. And so again, I like you as my stepdad. That's the problem. I feel like I'm moving my dad out and you in, and I need to figure out how to love you both. And so those kinds of dilemmas can be helpful. Anytime you enter into that dilemma with a child or make that overt, then you're helping them put words on it, you're helping them make sense of it, and they need a neutral person to talk that through with them because it's too volatile a subject to share it out loud with the people that they love. They don't want to risk hurting somebody's feelings. Okay, number 6, a place to serve. I always want us to remember, single parents have so much to offer. They got time, they got energy, they got passion. And don't just think of them as, well, we got to figure out scholarships. Well, we got to figure out a way to take care so they can show up. Well, no, find places for them to serve. Now, we've got to support their ability to serve. We've got to make sure their kids are covered and those responsibilities and obligations are taken care of, and sometimes we can be sensitive to that. But look for ways to get them engaged and involved, because I think that really, really kind of this post-divorce, to dumb it down, the family itself is going through 3 little phases. The crisis phase, right, where we're separating into different homes and everything that goes along with that, and kids are moving, and adults are trying to figure out how to pay the bills, and it's crisis mode. And then there's that transitional middle phase where, okay, we're beginning to settle into our new schedules, and we all kind of figure out what's going on. And then there's that emerging stage where the single parent is strong and healthy and engaged and has something to give again. That's what we're talking about here, is finding them in that space and giving them places to give again. Now, let me just tell you something. I just have a huge burden on my heart for what I'm about to say to you. Elizabeth Marquardt, in the research she did for the book Between Two Worlds, where she essentially went and interviewed a bunch of young adult children who had grown up between divided parents, all right, divorced households. She interviewed them around the moral and spiritual lessons that they learned and how it impacted their life. And one of the things she found is that 75% of kids whose parents divorced cannot remember one person from their church engaging them in conversation around their parents' divorce. Not one. I'm looking back over my ministry years, and I can think of a lot of times I did not engage. That's on us, gang. That's on us. You can't expect them to show up at your door so you can minister to them. And we get in that mode, and I know we're busy, and I know we got a lot of stuff going on. I get that. I really get that. I'm just saying, in all of the confusion and all of the burden and all the transition and all of the I'm not sure what I know or who I know or whether I believe in God and how he's like my father or my stepfather, if we don't go to them, in particular during that crisis transitional time, man, we are irrelevant. 80% of single parents don't go to church. Why? Because they're just surviving. And Sunday morning, the last thing on their mind is getting up, getting the kids ready, and doing another rush thing to try to, in particular when you go there and you don't feel like you're connected, and this is the place where the divorce happened, and people look at me funny, and I don't feel like it's home anymore, and I don't have a small group to go to or a Sunday school class to go to because we were a couple when we went there. And then my kids tell me that they can't keep up with the curriculum because every Sunday's built on the Sunday before, and every other week they miss it. So they missed week 2, and they missed that in week 3 they're trying to figure out what they studied in week 2. And so half the time they feel like they don't fit and they don't belong. And so they're telling me that it feels awkward for them to show up. And they're kind of an outsider there. And hey, if they're an outsider and I'm feeling it too, then we're just not going. That's on us. That's on us. We got to go to them. Yes.
Do you offer some course that you can teach parents to engage? I think sometimes parents feel awkward.
Yeah.
If they might say something to the child, and I'm not trying to take away anything that you're saying, but sometimes a parent's more fearful of hurting that child that they really don't know. Maybe they're in their small group, and they don't want to engage and ask that child, so how's life in your family this week? What happens if that kid just unloads on that small group leader? That small group leader maybe doesn't know how to interact. I get the fact that we're adults and that we need to engage in these kids' lives and to be a resource for them. But at some point, it would be good for there to be some sort of training.
Yeah.
Because parents maybe don't know the right questions to ask because they haven't been through a divorce. Maybe they have a pretty healthy family relationship and you've got 2 kids in your small group that you don't know how to ask the right questions.
Okay, so I'm going to repeat the question. It's an excellent one. Is there any sort of course or program that helps train volunteers, youth workers, small group leaders in how to engage children around some of these things? I am unaware of any. Honestly, today is the best I've got. We need more, right? I mean, we obviously need to go a step farther. But does anybody here know of any sort of thing that's designed to help with that? I mean, there's divorce care for kids, but those are really designed to get kids in a room and help them walk through this as a group, not so much equipping the leaders. Does anybody know of anything? Do you know, Mary, of anything? Okay. Yeah, so there's good stuff to help kids. There's a program called the Big D that's designed divorce for teenagers is what that program is, the Big D. Again, materials designed to help children through the transitions and that's sort of process it and work through, not so much training, equipping of leaders. Yes.
I equate it to the fact that we're growing up in a generation where there's dads don't know how to be dads because their dads didn't train them.
Thanks, Aaron.
I was saying we equate it to we're growing up in a generation where dads don't know how to train their kids because their fathers didn't train them. And so as parents trying to help a blended family, a child that might be in your small group or even another family, we don't want to step out sometimes fearful of the repercussion of what it's going to entail. Is that an excuse? Some might say yes, some might say no, but if there's training available where we can help reach out to these people, maybe there's a curriculum that you could write.
Yeah, we'll get right on that.
Yeah, I know.
No, it's
but
a serious,
you hear what I'm asking.
It's a really, I mean, it's a great question. And the fact that we don't have anything, when I say we, I mean the church in mass, you know, it really is an indictment of how we've kind of just sidestepped it. Yeah, Aaron?
I think that sometimes waiting for that curriculum or that training might just be overthinking it. Like it is okay just to say, how are you doing?
Yeah.
And let them dump.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that's if the small group's not a good place for that, where it is. But if your small group's really not a good place for that, then, you know, take them fishing or take them to coffee or whatever and just ask the question and let it be okay for them just to dump. Yeah. I mean, it would be great. I agree. I would love to see resources that say this is exactly how you do it. But sometimes it's cathartic and useful and healthy and Christian, you know, just to let them vent and just be willing to absorb whatever they throw out there. And then just to say, I don't have an answer to that. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
You know,
Let me give you just my little 1 minute kind of spiel on this. And this is the same thing I would say to a parent who says, what do I say when my kid unloads and that dad's not picking them up on time and hasn't done so for the last 6 months and they're really hurting and they're really sad about that? What do I do? It's called emotional coaching, and I would just encourage you as leaders to do the very same thing. It's where you do what he just said. You engage the kid around what's going on. Over time, what you're trying to do is help, number one, young children in particular get some words to put on their feelings. They don't always have that vocabulary yet. And so when you say to them, oh man, you are really hurt mad. And by the way, what's hurt mad? Hurt, there's different kinds of anger, right? There's hurt anger, there's sad anger, and there's frustrated anger. So frustrated anger is why you scream at somebody on the highway when they cut you off. That's a frustrated anger. That's why you do that, right? Sad anger is what you feel. That's why you cuss at dad because when he didn't show up again, right? So that's a different kind of it. So when you begin to, as an adult, put words on that, youth worker, put words on that, man, I definitely can feel the sadness coming through in your anger. Number one, you're helping kids connect their experience to emotions. That's helpful. Then number two is you just kind of walk them through. Tell me more about that. How does that make you feel? What do you want to do? What do you usually do with that? Well, I usually scream, cuss, or I play video games for 15 hours. Yeah, okay, so that's you just kind of retreat to that place. Yes, that's exactly what I do. And yeah, it's frustrating, but what you really want is your dad, and you miss him. And you don't know how to get your hands on him, and you wish that he would. And how does that make you feel about your dad? And you're basically just kind of engaging the emotion and the sadness and then putting words on it and guiding them through a little bit of a process of trying to make sense of it, and now what am I going to do with that? Does that fix it? This is very important. No. But it's what I like to call hugging the hurt. It's the same thing you did when your kids skinned their knee when they were 4 and come running up, bawling and squalling, and jump into your lap, and it's bleeding and running down their leg, and you don't fix it, but you hug the hurt, and you kiss them, and you give them some TLC, and you put a little Band-Aid on the boo-boo, and they, after a bit, kind of get back into life. They're still wounded, but they get back into life, and sometimes that's really all we have is hugging the hurt. But at least they got the hug. I mean, I'm just so convinced so many kids are just completely isolated in this experience that we've been laying out today. And that is worse because they don't know how to make sense of it. They don't have any wisdom to put on it. And so when you engage and hug the hurt, you also have an opportunity every now and then to say something from the heart of God that does give them a little wisdom. Did you have a thought?
Yeah, I was just going to say that whenever you're talking to them, they need to have no judgment whatsoever.
Yeah.
They can say
Good.
whatever they're angry about without you making them feel like they are a bad child or you shouldn't think that way. Just no judgment whatsoever and no diagnosis.
Yeah. Good.
No clinical anything to them. They don't want that. They
That's
just
right.
want to talk about it, say they're angry, and not have you, well, you need to go see this therapist, or you need to go, well, I'm just mad.
Yeah.
It's,
You
I
got
have
it.
a teenager.
Well said. Well said. Let me turn the corner a little bit. Let's talk about step families, okay? And I'm going to say something maybe a bit controversial, but I'm going to bring it into balance. So let's see how you feel about this. What kids don't necessarily need from their single parent is a marriage. Now, right off the bat, I am a strong, strong advocate for healthy step families. And just a month ago in September, or when was it? Was it October? No. Thank you. My months are running together. We had FamilyLife sponsored a summit down in Dallas, and we pulled 150 people together from around the country who are all doing step family ministry, and we got them in the room together for the first time ever, and we just had a conversation about what's working and what's not, and we kind of learned from each other, and it was really cool. But one of the things that came out is some new research that none of us were aware of, I wasn't even aware of, that says that children who grow up in healthy, stable, loving step families, number one, have a higher view of the institution of marriage than children who just went through parents' divorce and then didn't have the mitigating factor of the healthy step family. Okay, so this is where they have a better view of marriage, number one. Number two, their marriages, when they do get married, have a lower divorce rate than children who went through a parental divorce and then didn't have that healthy step family in the middle. And number three, their marriages as adults now tend to reflect more the healthy step-family marriage than the unhealthy parental marriage that ended in divorce. This is really significant news. This is really good news. It's what I call promised land stuff. You left Egypt, you had a long journey, and you get to the promised land, and there's rewards, and there's payoffs. And in effect, it changes the next generation. We can kind of take back, if you will, what Satan tried to destroy in the divorce. We can take it back, and the step family can be the redemptive piece. if they're healthy and done well. That's the qualifier. If step families are done poorly, it adds chaos, it adds distress, it adds more negativity into a life of a child, and the next generation is worse, not better. Why are young people today cohabiting at unbelievable rates? Because they are scared to death of marriage, and they're avoiding it at every cost. Because we've had 40 years of marriage and divorce and remarriage and redivorce. And they're not buying. And you can't blame them. And so we keep trying to come up with all these little scenarios where we can be with somebody without having to be with somebody. That's what cohabitation is. That's what hooking up is. That's what stay-over relationships are. And, you guys know what that is. It's 2 nights at your apartment and 3 nights at my apartment, and we'll be in our separate apartments. The other, stay-over sort of thing. We keep trying to find ways of being together without being together. It doesn't work. It won't pay off. But it's all driven by fear, and it makes sense because culturally we should be afraid of things that don't work. But when you put that mitigating healthy thing in the middle, it's a game changer. That's good news. Now, all the way back to this, so let me clarify this. Having said that about healthy stepfamilies, I also want to tell single parents who want to know, should I get married so my kids have a mother, so my kids have a father, so my kids have a 2-parent household? That is the wrong reason to get married, because there are no guarantees, number one, that that's actually going to be beneficial for your kid, and number two, the statistics are pretty clear. Children in single-parent families can do just as well as children in step-families, just as well on every measure, academics, emotional, behavioral, on and on and on. They can do just as well growing up in a single-parent household. You don't get married to hire a dad, okay? Don't let people do that. Don't encourage them to do that. If they fall in love with somebody because they met them on eHarmony and they're living together, don't just necessarily go, well, y'all just ought to get married. That's not the right solution. They need to move back out. They need to take some time and really slow down and look at their relationship and make some decisions about whether they should be together, not just get married because it sounds like the right thing to do. You are not creating a biological family when you get married. You're creating a stepfamily, and it's completely different. I think it's really important that we give single parents the permission to stay single. Raise your kids. If you fall in love with somebody and God seems to be in it and all points move forward and all the counselors on the outside are saying this is a healthy thing, great. But if you don't fall in love with somebody, raise your kids. Do a good job with that. We're going to support you. Honestly, if they're young adults when you get remarried, it's a little bit easier transition. It's still a significant transition for young adults, for adults who become adult stepchildren. It is still a significant transition. But they're living on their own, and you're not trying to tell them to pick up their socks as a step-parent, and so it helps. I think that's important, that we have that point of view. Here's what I mean by you're not creating a biological family. So here's the puzzle pieces of marriage and family life, right? If we put them together, we create a first marriage, first family, we get a house, a home. And it has a shape and a size and a texture and a color and a smell if you were to walk into it. If we take some of those puzzle pieces out and we put them into another, with puzzle pieces from another home, you get a stepfamily home. Now notice, it's still a home. It has a size and a shape and a color and a texture, and if you walked into it, it would have a smell. But it's very different than this one. And that's part of the problem of step-family ministry is when couples get married, they think they're recreating this, but they've just created this. And you just navigate this one differently than this. So there's certain things that apply, and there's certain things that we teach families all the time that don't apply. But that simple little image, and then really we kind of help them understand the size and the shape and the color and the texture. And that's really what step-family education and ministry is really all about. But if they don't catch that, then they keep wondering why we're a failure. And really they're not. They've just created this. But they're comparing themselves to that. Does that make sense? It really is important that they kind of learn that and that you can kind of cast a vision for that. Especially for those dating single parents, and they start talking the fantasy talk, and you can kind of hear it. Yep, Yep, they're thinking they're going to create this. And we need to gently and softly try to help them open their eyes to what they're going to be creating. Are there a lot of step families? Yeah, this first little bar on the left there, 40% of families in the U.S. are step families. And what that means is, and I know that sometimes stats get really confusing when you look at them, this takes into consideration both households. So if we're back up here to our demonstration, this is one of the first stats we have that actually considers both households. So mom's household with her new with the stepdad who's with her now, that's a household. But biological dad over here is a single dad, but his kids are connected to a step family. Does that make sense? And so therefore he is kind of part of that extended step family system. So this really takes into consideration both of those. And it also adds in kids who are over the age of 18 who have step relationships, but they may not be living at home anymore. And so really this is kind of the first good picture we have in America of the number of step families. And it's a big number. It's a big number. So this affects a lot of people. If you look at it from an individual point of view, 100 million Americans have a step relationship. I just throw that out just to go, wow, we're connected. And you either have a step parent, a step sibling, or a step child, or maybe you have a step uncle or a step grandfather, or I'm constantly amazed when you start asking people at church these questions. How many of you have a step relationship? People, all of a sudden the lights go on. Like, whoa, I never really thought about it. My brother got divorced, and then he's remarried a woman, and so, I guess I have step nephews. Yeah, that's what that means. And they're going to be at Christmas, And so it's not necessarily your household, but you're connected to it. You can reach out and touch it. All of a sudden, people go, yeah, that's true. By the way, that's a good thing to do with your elders and your church leaders who think this is not our church. But if they start looking at their own life, all of a sudden they go, whoa, maybe this is our church. 60 to 70% of them are going to divorce without help. That other little stat there I think is pretty revealing. In 2008, a third of people who were divorcing were actually re-divorcing, meaning they were going through a second or third divorce. A third. So if we could prevent re-divorce, which is what we're trying to do at Family Life Blended, then we can cut into that divorce rate really, really quick. Okay, so how do we go about doing this? Let me just share with you some barriers, because there's some things that are unique, I think, for step families in particular. One of them has to do with spiritual marginalization. They feel marginalized from church life and connected, and why is that? And really, if we go back to this illustration, I kind of did it this way on purpose for you guys. I usually do it a little differently, but we started with one couple and their 3 kids, and then the divorce and the impact of that and what's going on for the kids, because that's kind of the way that happens in real time from the child's point of view. They're now living between 2 households, and then mom starts dating somebody, and then we add another layer to that, and now we have new relationships and more transitions and adjustments and more loss that's added on to the previous loss. And so that's kind of the kids' world. And oftentimes that first separation or divorce is what paves the way to this marginalization. I don't feel the church didn't come and connect to me. They didn't come to support me. They didn't come to look in on us. I didn't feel that. I go to my Sunday school class. I don't fit there anymore. I feel really awkward. My friends have withdrawn because they've taken sides, and they're kind of on my ex-husband's side or my ex-wife's side. And all of a sudden, I feel like I've lost my place in church, and it's hard to get up on Sunday morning. So we're not going. And there's a huge drift from church life. Then there's a new dating experience and a new love and a new relationship. And sometimes that's a motivation for people to come back into church. Okay, we're married now, and we all know church is set up for married people, because it is. And so we feel married. Let's go to church. But we feel ashamed of our past. We feel guilt for the divorce. We feel responsible for this, that, or the other. And so let's not tell them our story. Now, I can tell you as a step family ministry leader, that is our biggest challenge. We actually polled some Family Life constituents, and just to see, and sure enough, this shame thing really came to the surface. We asked people, why do you think sometimes people do not engage in if a program is offered in their church, why do people not go? And shame and or hiding accounted for 22% of the first and second place votes. People were categorized 1 through 14, I think it was, rank them in order of why people don't go. And these were step-family couples, by the way, answering the questions. And they're ashamed of being divorced. They're avoiding the social stigma. They would rather prefer that people at church not know they are divorced. All of that adds up to we're not showing up. And if we do show up, we're not telling you our story because we're not sure you're going to like us after we tell you the story. And isn't that sad? We can say, come as you are on the head of your webpage. But until people experience that it's really okay, they're not going to come as they are. It's a barrier. And so we have to do things like build bridges of grace. We have to do things intentionally to tell people it's okay if they come, if they present, if they let us know that they're in need. Maybe they're dating, they want some premarital counseling. We need to know the story. We need to have an opportunity. Maybe you set up a small group for step families. But just because you build it doesn't mean they'll come. You have to build bridges of grace to make it easier for them to come. So how do you build bridges of grace? Well, messages from the pulpit is huge. Not condescending messages. Oh, those poor step families. If you're in one of those situations, we just feel so sorry for you guys. We got a class set up just for you, and we're hoping that it's really going to change your life. It's condescending. It's negative. It's saying, pathetic. That doesn't help. Things that do help are using the word stepmom, stepdad from the pulpit, Mother's Day, Father's Day. My goodness. Just use the term. It's Mother's Day. We're so glad you're here. If you're a mom, if you're a stepmom, if you're a foster mom, if you're an adoptive mom, if you're a grandma, if you're a woman who's mentoring a child who's not yours, we just are so glad you're here today. We want to honor you. We've got a little gift. Blah, blah, blah. All you got to do is use the word and you will catch their attention. You will say to them, we care. And it's safe here. Those kinds of things over time really go a long way. Couples giving a testimony. Hey, we're starting a group, and here's Joe and Julie, and they're going to tell you a little bit about their life. Yeah, we had some challenges, and we got married, and we were bright-eyed and bushy-tailed about the whole thing. And lo and behold, there's a few things that happened that kind of showed us real quickly that our home was going to be different. And we had some challenges. We really worked through some things, and we found some good information, and we just want to share that with you guys. All of a sudden, all the step couples in the room are going, okay, I guess it's all right. We can come out of the closet. We've got to work really hard to do that. Okay, so the key to step family ministry is helping them understand and manage their complexity. I showed you the complexity up here, right? We want to help couples make sense of all the ropes, the baggage, the buckets, the rocks, the emotional ties, the loyalty, the sadness. We got to help them make sense out of that because that complexity really works against them. I'll show you visually what I showed you up here on the stage a little while ago. We won't take a lot of time with this, but just to kind of give you another run at it. So here's Susie and John. They got married and they had 3 kids. Basically our scenario that we had up here. Then they divorced. Bob married Betty in another part of the universe. They too had a couple of kids. They too got a divorce. Since then, Betty has remarried Frank, and Bob has remarried Susie. Now, Susie, when she married Bob, she knew she'd get a mother-in-law and a father-in-law, but what she had no idea about was that she was also getting an ex-wife-in-law, as I like to call it. Neither did Bob know he was getting an ex-husband-in-law. And who John is dramatically affects Bob's ability to be a stepdad to John's kids. Man, I had no clue that would impact my life. Right. Susie has primary custody of her 3 kids. They live with their mom and their stepdad, Bob. Every other weekend and 6 weeks in the summer, they're with their dad, John. Betty has primary custody of her 2, and on occasion, Bob and Susie have all 5. Now, what we traditionally do at church is what? These 3 kids, we send them to their Bible classes, their youth program, whatever it is. We send her to her class, and maybe he goes with her now that they're a married couple. And when we do marriage enrichment, we talk to them about their coupleness. But we don't give them anything to deal with that. So it's fine. That coupleness stuff is good. Communication and conflict resolution skills is great. They're going to need them too. But if we don't talk about conflict resolution skills in light of conflict with an ex-husband or an ex-wife or Frank, who is a stepdad and not biologically related to any of the children, but who is a parent figure to these two kids and influences their life and who they are when they come over to this house, which influences Susie's kids, then we're not really helping Susie and Bob do life. Does that make sense? So we have to have topics that address their world in the ways that impact how they live with one another. So the other thing we do is parent training. And we carve this up. We can kind of do this with traditional biological families. We can have marriage enrichment, and now we're going to have the parent class, and you guys go to your parent class. And the same people are in those two classes, but we don't really talk about the other topics. You can't do that with step families. You got to talk about all of it all the time. Because parenting and co-parenting and step parenting all impacts kids and marriage. It's all one big ball, right? And so you find some ways of giving them that. Some of the resources we've developed are trying to aim at doing those sorts of things. By the way, this is one step family configuration. One. Here's another one. Cindy was married to Rick, 2 kids. He was tragically killed in a car accident. She has remarried Larry. That's their step family. Notice how incredibly different that is. They don't have another household to send the kids to. They have a memory. A living memory of dad, but no co-parenting. There's a permanence to the loss for the kids rather than after divorce where they continue to get to see their parent. Very different scenario, and yet there's some similarities, right? Here's another one. Jason and Katrina, never married, but had a child, Tamara. Alicia was married to Scott at one point. They divorced, no kids, but now Alicia and Jason are dating. They're coming to your class. All 3 of those last step family configurations are in one room together. And you're going to try to help them. Or their kids are all coming to your youth program. And oh, by the way, every other Sunday morning or every other Sunday night or every other Wednesday night, you got one parent dropping them off and another parent doing the visitation swap around your Bible class time. You guys had that? Have you talked through that with the Bible class teachers about who's dropping off and who can pick up and who has the rights and who can't? And what if ex-grandma shows up, And wow, there's a complexity. We got to think through logistics. We got to think through who can and who can't. We'll get to some of those other ministry applications here in just a minute. Again, those are different configurations. We did the math, 67 different possible step family configurations. I just showed you 3. Isn't that exhausting to begin to think about that? In other words, it's okay if you get confused, because I still get confused. I've been doing this for 17 years and I still get confused. We shouldn't expect that we're going to have all the answers for every scenario, every configuration, every whatever. We're just going to learn how to just go in there and engage them, listen, hear what they're saying, hear what they're feeling. And when it comes down to what do I do about, sometimes you say, I don't know. But hey, I'm going to try to point you to a resource. We're going to try to point you to a small group. We're going to try to point you to something that is valuable and useful and really targeted and directed towards you. I think there's really 3 big objectives in step family ministry. We want to acknowledge them. We want to build those bridges of grace, as I was talking about earlier. Let them know we're here for you. Educate, which means giving them practical answers to the questions they're asking. And then create some connections, meaning put them in fellowship with other people. Same thing with single parent ministry. We're doing the same thing. And really, this is no different than any other ministry you do. Right? Any other group of people, we're essentially trying to do this thing. We're trying to make the church to be the church, give them some life answers and questions, biblically based, and let them know that we're here for them. Okay, so let me run through a few ideas of how we can do that. Raise awareness of leadership in your church. I hope if you'll do one thing after today, it's that you'll take senior pastor to lunch after this, or one of the decision makers at your church, that you'll just try to raise their awareness a little bit about realities of families in your church and in your community. Create a continuum of care. This comes from Jeff and Judy Parziel, some good friends who just kind of laid out one day, this is the different ways that we can minister to families in different family situations. So, for example, you can start doing good work in divorce care, right? That's where you're doing single parent ministry. That's where you're engaging couples around the future You can help couples going through, or excuse me, single parents going through divorce care. You can share an article with them. Say, hey, if you ever fall in love again, here's what you might be facing in the days ahead. Here's something unique about step-family living. Just want you to know. And they're probably ignoring you because at this season, they're like, man, I'm never getting married again. Forget that. But 2 years later, they're ready and they found somebody and they're dating and they're really curious, right? So then they come back to you and you go, yeah, let's talk about that. So you can do stuff there, plant seeds. Single parenting, again, very important. I'm a strong believer that a healthy single parent household is one of the best protective mechanisms for step-family adjustment. Here's what I mean by that. If mom, up here in our scenario with her 3 kids, is functioning pretty well, at a pretty high level as a single parent, if we can help her, encourage her, bolster her, give her the energy, give her a break every now and then, keep her going, keep the standard high in her home. What I mean by that, the standard of conduct. Typically, before the divorce, it's here, and then after divorce, for both households, it typically falls. A lot, a little, I don't know. It depends, but it falls. In other words, bedtime gets loose. I asked you 6 times. I'm going to ask you a 7th. Whereas before, I'd never asked you 6. I'd asked you twice. And there's a certain level of expectation and follow-through. And why does it fall? It's hard as a single parent. It's all on you. You're tired. There's an exhaustion factor. It's not that you don't care. You're just tired. All of that means we kind of drop the standard some. Now, if it drops a lot, it's a setup when single mom marries. And stepdad comes in and goes, holy cow, these kids are getting away with murder. I'm not putting up with this stuff. We're going to change some things around here. That's a setup. He doesn't have a rope. He didn't have authority. He didn't have a place. He didn't have respect. How's he going to make those changes? He's not. He's going to try, and it's all going to backfire on him. Kids are going to rebel. They're going to complain to mom because they do have a rope. And they're going to pull on that rope. They go with guilt. Mom! And all of a sudden, everybody's caving in because she's used to caving in. And you can see where that goes, right? It sets the couple against each other, and now they're... So, if we're doing a good job there, it sets them up when they move into remarriage. And obviously, we can do mentoring, we can do training, we can do pre-step family counseling. The step family education piece goes along with the marriage enrichment piece, where we're helping everybody understand the complexity of their world, their life, their marriage, their parenting scenarios. Marriage and parenting, the general marriage and parenting stuff you do at your church is good for step families too. They just also need stuff that's specifically designed for them. So that's just, I don't want to overwhelm you. My point here in this is saying, pick one. What's the most logical, reasonable thing for your church to do next? It might be you've got an awesome divorce recovery thing, and all you got to do is tweak it a bit, and that's the one thing you're going to do. Great. It could be that your role in youth ministry is that you also have an ability to impact how marriage enrichment gets done, because you get to speak into that and talk to the people who do that training. And so you can say to them, hey, look, there's a lot of step couples in your marriage enrichment classes, and can we just offer a few things that would help them? We're working on some ideas around here to help marriage ministries know exactly what to do just in their general marriage class. You don't have to change it. You don't have to make a big, whole new program. Just little things can be helpful. So, just think through some of that and ask yourself. I know historically we thought of marriage ministry as just being first married couples. And, we had some premarital couples. And so we'd take them in here and we'd send them up there. Well, really, the reality today is that we've got a blended family. We've got another category, but it's all marriage ministry. Sometimes they come in here, and we also make sure they have access to this, but we also want to have something really substantial for them. Or maybe they come in here, and they go to a premarital workshop or class or something, and you say, yeah, this is great, but we also want to send you over because we got this that's really, really on target for you. And then you can go to the love and respect thing. And then, does that make sense? And so it's kind of all of those pieces working together over time. Step family answers to step family questions. That's my way of saying you really have to target their life and what's going on for them. Let me give you one quick illustration, and I've alluded to it already, but let me just show it to you visually. So if you looked at the different parenting styles, and you guys are familiar with this, you've seen these before. If we looked at How in charge are you as a parent? I don't mean control like dominating. I mean just behavioral management of your children. Either you tend to be high or low or somewhere in the middle, right? Warmth is up and down on the left. That's nurturance, love, appreciation, being a cheerleader for kids. Well, God is the authoritative parent. He's the perfect combination for us of high structure, expectations, behavioral management. He lets us suffer the consequences of our choices. He's more than happy to do that. But he loves us like crazy. And it's never failing. And his grace abounds. Those two things work in concert to create the perfect parent. There's been over 2,000 research studies on good parenting, and they all say authoritative parenting is the way to go. Just like God does for us. That's cool. All right, so permissive, you can see there's low structure. You can come home when you want. Oh, I love you like crazy. But there's really no expectations. Neglectful is you don't have any expectations. You don't have any connection emotionally. That's a really, really bad place to be. Authoritarian is that label for a lot of control and low warmth. I hate to say it, guys, don't be offended, but that's kind of the stereotypical military parent, right? Who's got lots of rules and expectations and snaps and yells, but doesn't hug, doesn't warm, doesn't encourage, doesn't come through when kids are disappointed. All right, well, you got those quick parenting styles. So bio parents often have a temptation in step families to move towards the permissive end of things and step parents to move towards the authoritarian end of things. And that's because of this single parent drop. We got permissive. Step parent comes in and goes, whoa, we got to straighten things up. And the further they go, the further they go. And it works both ways. The more permissive the bio parent gets, the more the step parent says, somebody's got to do something around here. And they work against each other towards the extremes, and they get polarized. Now notice, if one parent is here, bio parent, and the step parent is here, these are a couple. So you got one partner here and one partner here. What does that mean for their marriage? They're totally polarized. They're against each other. And that's really where the breakdown comes. That's a classic little deal that happens with families. I draw this little box in my counseling office all the time and show people that. Okay, this is where you're stuck. And what we need to do is we need to get... No, I'm not going to show you. What we need to do is get bio parent to be the parent. Step parent, I want you to learn your role. There's some limitations. I want you focusing on relationship building and connection and bonding with the step kids, because right now, until you have a rope, we really don't have much authority. We're going to leave the authority stuff to the bio parent. That's kind of one of those little things that we're going to work out for them. And over time, as a step parent, you can move in your role. It's a gradual progression toward authoritative parenting. And you can move there with some kids in some circumstances. And I won't talk any more around that, but just to say you get a quick sense of the model that we try to help people understand. And when they get it, that really moves them in a better place and to a place of strength. As a family. Let me just pause for a second. As you guys take that in, what thoughts, questions? Yes?
One thing that I was thinking of is just the single parent part of it.
Mm-hmm.
Because, doing that successfully is going to give so much more success on down the road to step parenting and all that. You said that 80% of single parents are not currently in church, and so I think one of the huge roles is reaching out to those single parent families and getting them in church, making them feel included. Being a single mother myself for 6 years, it's, when the pastor is talking about, at Mother's Day, acknowledging single moms, acknowledging the stepfathers, the stepmothers. I think that that's extremely important. But reaching out to the single parent, one thing that we did this year was at the beginning we have our fall launch for our life group. So for the single mothers group, what we did is we reached out to a few photographers in the state, and they actually donated their time. And we opened up a family photo session to single moms across the state. They didn't have to be involved in the church. What was amazing is, typically as a single parent, you don't feel like you're a family. You know, you kind of feel like something's missing. So family photo shoots are huge. You know, you think of the memories. They're not going to get that time back. And we were able to reach out to those women. They had a professional photo shoot. They got pictures. You know, it was free of charge. And it was amazing because God blessed us with the people. It's nothing I did. God just orchestrated and put it all together. But finding ways to reach out to those single parents, because if we can get the single parents to a place where they're secure in who they are in Christ, that's going to give so much more success to step parenting down the road. I mean, that's just the foundation.
I agree. What else have you found that's helpful to help single moms?
Well, one thing that we did, we meet now every other week. We meet on Sunday evenings. At every meeting, we have free childcare. So the church offers that. Typically, they drop the kids off at the church, then they come to a house. We don't have the meeting at the church. We kind of have a different environment. So there is that time for them just to be. It's typically about 3 hours where somebody's taking care of the kids and the child care is free to the single moms at the church. Last week, one thing that was awesome is we had some of the prayer pastors at our church come speak to the group. And it was so powerful because some of our moms, you know, some, let's say, got pregnant in high school and never were in a relationship and were never married. We have some that went through a hard divorce. We have some where the spouse is deceased. We have some where the ex-spouse just chooses to not be involved and the children don't have any contact. It's just the mom raising the kids. And getting them outside of just the regular therapy and getting them into prayer, the pastor actually speaking to them, because we've had so many ladies that said, okay, I went to a counselor, I went through therapy, and they gave me all these strategies, but I still feel empty, I feel hopeless. And I think connecting them to the ministry at your local church that is there, that's available, that's free, is huge for single parents.
Thank you. One of the things that she said that I want to highlight is 3 hours. They're 3 hours away from their kids. They're provided for. And okay, when I said respite a little while ago, that's a respite. Drop your kids off at church, drive 15 minutes to the second location, and you have 45 minutes of small group, and go back. That's not respite. That's hurried, and that's crazy, and that, you know. But obviously, you got to get a commitment from the church. You got to get child care workers. You got to pay somebody. There's stuff involved in that, and it's worth it. It's really, really worth it. Okay, so quick picture there. Step family education. Don't just focus on the marriage. Let me jump down to children's ministry and student ministry stuff. Let's kind of jump into ministry structure for a minute. I alluded to it earlier when we were doing the demonstration, but process with me out loud how life has got to be different for you as a ministry leader in light of this kind of complexity going on with your kids' lives. I said earlier about curriculum, for example. If every week your curriculum builds on the previous week, kids, half your group, going to miss it. What does that do for them? How does that create, a sense of I don't connect or I don't belong or I don't know? I still every once in a while run into a church who gives awards for Sunday school attendance. Well, what are you saying to the kids who can't get the award because of no fault of their own? Because the judge says you can't go there every week. Just what are those messages? Jump into that world for a minute. Think out loud with me. Let me feed you another one. You're taking these 3 kids on the youth retreat. Mom goes to your church. And you're taking her 3 kids on the youth retreat. Dad doesn't go to your church. Right? He's at church B. Do you communicate with Dad? Do you send him the youth material stuff on email? I mean, is he on the list? Do you text him about the schedule? Do you let him know? Do you bother to pick up the phone? I would encourage you to do all these things. I'm being a little facetious here. I would encourage you to pick up the phone. Create a relationship with a biological dad. You've never seen him in your life. Give the man a call. Let him know, hey, I'm taking your kids for 4 days this weekend. I just want you to know I'm going to take good care of them. I want you to know where they're going to be, what they're going to be doing. And I want to make sure you have my number in case you need to get a hold of us for any reason. Thank you for your time. Have a nice day. Yeah.
I was just thinking about the amount of pressure we put on the kids when it's their weekend with dad and we want to take them away on a retreat. And so we say, hey, just go ask your dad if y'all can switch.
Yeah, you don't understand. Yeah. It's really a great thing. You should go through all the pain and turmoil of working this out with your parents so that you can be on our retreat. I mean, we just got to acknowledge.
I feel incredibly selfish, when I think of in those terms.
Yeah. Let's talk through some logistics. Okay, we don't have access to dad. How do we get access to dad? First of all, I would suggest to you, let's back up a step. Go to mom and say, hey, I realize your ex-husband doesn't come to church here, I would love to be able to reach out to him, but I respect your opinion. What do you think? Is this a wise thing to do, or is this not a wise thing to do? Okay? I'm thinking of a family right now that the ex is left the marriage for a homosexual lifestyle and is belligerent towards Christianity and everything it stands for, and there's a court case, and it's a mess. So that biological mom just might say, no, please don't do that. That would make life even more difficult for all of us. Thank you for your intentions there. I'd rather you not. And you honor that, and you don't. I think you'll find more often than not, the bio parent says, sure, I'd love for you to do that. I probably need to give them a heads up and let them know who you are and that you're going to be contacting them, and that I've just let them know, or that it's all about the kids going on the retreat this weekend. Whatever. They'll know the rules. So you respect that, you go and you ask that parent and you find out the rules, and then you act accordingly. But it's amazing what can happen when you just take that little step and reach out and connect around what's going on with the kids. Medical releases. Oh, I knew I had something else. Medical releases. But step-parents cannot sign medical releases. They don't have any legal rights to do that sort of stuff. So you got to make sure the bio-parents sign it. Okay, so stepdad cannot sign for those 3 kids. He can sign for his kid, but he can't sign for those 3 kids. Do you know that? I mean, most of the time we just, didn't realize. Why can he not sign? Because he has no legal rights. Unless he's adopted the children, and that's a huge process. But minus that, they don't have any rights. Illustrations, stories, Bible stories. Holy cow. Most of the Old Testament are step families of a different shape and size, but they're step family stuff. Use their stories to engage kids around their world. Don't be afraid of that stuff. Go into that world and connect with them. Family retreats, try to create ways for people to come. Recognize that there still may be some awkwardness, like between step-parents and stepchildren, but it is what it is. They'll kind of figure that out for themselves. If it's super awkward, they probably are not going to come. So just try to move into that space and ask them a little bit about how those things are working. One of the things we talked about earlier was loyalty binds. I just want to show you this little clip just to show you how loyal kids can be to biological parents. This is from the movie Stepmom. Let me set it up for you. The scene is Susan Sarandon has her 2 children. They're riding horses. Just a few hours before, the stepmom, what's her name? Actress. Anyway, Julia Roberts has been in charge of the kids, but didn't handle them the way Susan Sarandon, mother, wanted her to handle her kids. And so she storms into this office at school and grabs her kids by the hands. You're never going to take care of my kids ever again. Storms out with her 2 kids. So here they are, the next scene, riding horses later that day, talking about what had happened. Notice what the little boy says.
Mommy,
What, sweetie?
isn't it Isabella's fault that I ran away?
No, you're right. That was your fault. But it's her fault for not taking care of my precious son as if it was her priority, which means her most important job.
Isabella's job is she works.
And mommy's work, too. They work very hard. In fact, I work harder as a mommy than I ever did when I had an outside job. I just don't get paid.
Does Isabel make a lot of money?
Well, people like Isabel who think only about themselves often do make a great deal of money.
I think she's pretty.
Yeah, if you like big teeth.
Mommy,
What, sweetie?
if you want me to hate her, I will.
See, he heard the messages pretty loud and clear, didn't he? You know, all the little jabs she's giving, yeah, people like Isabel who think only of themselves, you know, that horrible, awful, wicked stepmother. You know. Yeah, I'll hate her. He even tests the waters. I think she's pretty. Yeah, if you like big teeth, yeah. So he gets it. The message comes through. Not a problem, Mom. I'm all over this. I'll hate her. So this is the kid who goes to his dad's house, where stepmom is, and is a brat. All for the sake of his mom. You ever had parents come to you and go, man, I just don't understand why Johnny's acting that way. He never does this at our house. Or he's never. Well, yeah, they can be different kids in different contexts because different things are required of them there. Makes sense. It's a part of them figuring out the territory and who they need to be for the people that they love. Engage the kid around that. Don't run away from it. Take them to lunch, get them some ice cream, whatever that little deal is, pull them away, sit down with them one-on-one and just go, man, tell me about that. I'm wondering how that's working for you. They need a neutral person who can enter that space, dialogue with them, put words on it, help them to not feel so really weird, and at the same time maybe offer a little wisdom about what's going on. Yeah.
Multiple occasions I've had.
Sorry, let's get a mic to him. Sorry.
Well, it's pretty common for a kid to intentionally be ignorant about why their parents split up. And maybe one will know and the other child won't.
Okay.
And more than once they've come to me and say, hey, more or less, who should I blame?
Mm-hmm.
And they don't want to know. Give me a little guidance there.
Okay, so a kid comes to you and is basically saying, who do I blame? What do I do with all this?
Well, I mean, they don't ask who to blame, but you can just tell they're trying to sort it out. But they really don't want to know.
One response might be, you know, neither one of your parents is 100% to blame, but they're both responsible. They both have their part. And you probably know what your dad's part is. Man, my dad's mean, and he can. And your mom's part. Well, and they have an idea of what that means or what that adds up to. And by the way, as they grow and they develop, you know, move into adolescence, for example, you know, preteen versus teenagers, and they can think abstractly, and all those kind of things change. So all of a sudden, they're coming up with new answers and new solutions, and so the answer changes as they grow and as they develop. But for the time being, this is the way they see it. And you don't necessarily need to set them straight on the answer. You may have information they don't have. I think you just want to kind of get to that. All right, so everybody's responsible in some way. Now what? How do you love your dad in spite of that? How do you respond to him? How do you respect him? How do you... And by the way, that's a struggle sometimes for kids, where they have a lot of blame on one parent, maybe who had an affair. Let's just use that example. And there is a lot of anger, a lot of hurt, and a lot of blame directed towards that parent. And rightfully so. And yet, you still kind of have to, you enter that, you let them have it, you don't judge them. I really like what you said there. But then you do kind of turn the corner and say, yeah, and so now what? You know, let's talk about forgiveness. Let's talk about that challenge. And let's talk about how do you respect your dad even when you don't respect your dad. And you're just trying to offer a little guidance in that direction. Is that getting at what you were asking?
Do you think it's important to direct them to try to find out?
Sometimes, yes. And I'm going to repeat the question. Do you need to direct them to try to find out? Sometimes, yes. And boy, I got to talk around this one, because if the child goes to a biological parent, a mom, and says, so, did dad have an affair? Let's just kind of play with that one for a minute. And clearly there's this behavior that the child doesn't know about. I often find that mom doesn't want to burden the kid. She didn't want to blame dad. And by the way, dad may take advantage of all of this. And he's been feeding the kids a line about why they divorced, and he's blaming mom because he knows ultimately they're going to find out he had an affair. I mean, the games people play, it's just amazing. Kids get caught in the middle the whole time. I am a firm believer in truth-telling, but two things about it. Number one, you got to season it with grace. You got to season that with grace, because if you don't, you end up just heaping burden. It's throwing big rocks. Yeah, your dad had an affair, and I hope he burns in hell for it. And I hope that woman he's now living with, blah, 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 right? Versus, okay, let's talk. Here's the hard truth. Yes, your dad had a really... That's a very different tone. That's a very different message. It's seasoned with grace, okay? Most people feel like they're overburdening their kids by the truth. And it does put them in the middle. That's the second thing. This does put the kid in the middle. You cannot avoid it. I hate that, but it's the truth. So truth-telling creates a bind on a kid. But if it's seasoned with grace, then hopefully that just kind of helps mitigate it a little bit. I'd rather tell them the truth and them know than not. Now, the next question is, when do you tell them? You know, if they're 8, do you tell them the whole truth and nothing but the truth? I don't think so. I think it's a little bit like where do babies come from. You're going to tell them a little truth when they're 8, and a little bit more when they're 9, a little bit more when they're 10, and maybe a whole lot more when they're 15. And so there's layers, and it's kind of a developmental judgment call. Can this kid handle it? Some kids can handle it at younger ages. I mean, this is tough territory. And so you don't have the answers, and you're just trying to help coach this parent through thinking through that stuff. You know, what would it be like if you told him now? And do you feel like you need to tell your ex-husband, give him a heads up? Hey, listen, I'm going to tell him. Because they're asking, and they're not backing down. Sometimes that happens. They're not backing down. I feel like they need to know. I feel like they're ready to hear it. I just want you to know that I'm going to tell them. Would you like to be with me when I tell them? I've had people where that's a wise decision, and other people that's a dumb decision. You got to play that one out. Giving the other household a heads up is really grace. You know, if they're malicious, they're going to use it against you, and it is what it is.
So if you've got an older child who can handle the truth, but is very angry and bitter, say, let's stick with the affair, at dad for having the affair, and then the younger one who doesn't understand what's going on, and
right, and that creates a division between the siblings.
And he wants to tell, but I don't know.
Yeah, I would let the parent make the judgment about when the younger child learns, and try to encourage.
So the parent comes and asks you what to do.
Yeah.
So what do you do?
And that's where you talk through this. Okay, so there's some truth to be told here. How are we going to go about telling it? Is the child ready to hear it? What part of the story is the child ready to hear? What's your goal in telling the child? Your goal is to, again, season with grace the truth about what happened so that they can begin to grieve and deal with that hard truth. And it will be a hard truth, and it will not make people happy, and it will stir the pot, and all of that is true. But we got to pull the thorn on that sucker. You know, the lion and the mouse and the thorn, and you walk around with it forever, or do you get rid of it? You get rid of it. It's just a hard moment. But let's make sure that this is the timing and how you're going to go about telling them. It's the best you have.
So I mean, it's the best you can do. So you let the youngest kid think Dad still hung the moon.
Mm-hmm. Well,
I mean, are they going to?
They will until they hear this, and even they may even think he hung the moon after they hear it. I mean, sometimes loyalty is so strong they don't care. But yeah, it's just they didn't know what they didn't know. Questions, thoughts, comments?
It's really not, to me, the youth pastor's place to decide that.
Mm-hmm.
If a kid comes to you and asks,
Go
that
to
is
the
an
parent.
immediate sign I need to talk to the parent.
Yes, go to the
because
parent.
if you answer that, whatever your intentions are, they may withdraw.
Yes.
And say, this was not your place. You have no business talking to my kid this way.
Yes.
I know if I were a parent and somebody came, I mean, I am a parent of a kid like that. If they came up and he does have questions every once in a while, we do try to honestly answer him, because I do believe it, thou shalt not lie. So, and yes, seasoned with grace. I don't want to make the other parent look bad. That's not the goal. The goal is truth. And how is he going to accept this? But it's not to make either one look good or bad.
Yes.
And later on, you always have to remember as a parent, and this I suggest you would tell the other parent, or the parent that is asking this. Eventually, your child, when they grow up, will know what happened. Whether the other parent looks like the good guy and you always look like the bad guy, it doesn't matter as long as the child is the concern.
Yeah.
Not whether your feelings are hurt, or you're the more disciplinarian and the other parent is lets them party and have fun at their house. It doesn't matter. You are doing the best for the child. That's it.
Let's finish on that note, because the one thing that I just want to one more time take a run at is, what if the values between the homes are different? And you guys know that. You get kids in scenarios, single parent, step family, whatever it is, where between home values are extremely different. So mom and her new husband are trying to walk with the Lord, and bio dad in the other house, or whatever the case is not. And clearly the kids have a different value set. It is an extremely frustrating situation, because that influence is alive and well. It's one thing to say, I'm going to send my kids to school and hope the world doesn't invade their heart. It's another thing to say, I'm sending them home to the other home, and I hope the world doesn't invade their heart. That's just malicious. It's insidious, really. Okay, so bio mom, who's the Christ followers, coming to you going, what do I do? And here's my little shtick. My response is, first of all, I just want to say the hard thing, and that is this. You can't control Dad. You already knew that. You can't make him be good and righteous. You already knew that. I just want to acknowledge that puts limitations on what you can do. You and I cannot come up with a way of stopping his influence. First of all, that's parent alienation if you try. It's against the law if you try. And it will backfire on you, because your kids will just be angry at you because you prevented them from having a relationship with your dad. So don't even go there, right? But let's just acknowledge there's some limitations. Now, here's what you can do. You can teach and be very intentional about raising your kids to know the Lord and everything around that. Walk and talk and speak and live the life, because that carries a lot of weight and a lot of influence. You can also, season your conversation with inoculating them against what they're getting from the other home. You know what an inoculation is. That's when you get a shot in the arm, and they give you a controlled injection of the virus so that your body develops a system of fighting that. Well, we do this. Jesus did this, a Sermon on the Mount. You have heard that it was said. Here's a little controlled injection of the world's point of view. But I say to you, here's the inoculation. We do that in helping raise our kids to go out into the world and school and wherever. And you're also going to do some of that about Dad's house. Now, can I watch this R-rated movie? Mom says no, and here's why. Here's what our values are. Here's what we're trying to do. We want to put pure things in our heart and mind, so that's what comes out of us. Now, I'm aware that your dad may let you when you go to his house. And I'm just wondering how you would respond to that if he says, yeah, let's watch this movie. He may even suggest it. So how are you going to respond to that? Now, is that kid in a bind? Yes. Because mom's expecting me to give her the answer that she wants, and that's the answer, well, I'll tell Dad I'm not going to watch it. And then Dad's going to lay into the kid, well, you're not watching it because your mommy's a good at two shoes. And how many 15-year-olds, how many 5-year-olds can stand up under that pressure and say, yeah, you're right, Dad. Now, actually, it's not because of Mom. It's because I have my own belief in God, and I think this is the pure thing to do. How many kids can do that? That's a really, really tough moment for them. And yet you try to equip him or her with that inoculation to take it over into the other home so they make good choices. That's useful. It's helpful. It also has limitations. Sometimes under pressure, the kid caves and they're watching the R-rated movie. Or worse. And there's influence. And it pulls them away from the Lord and righteous things. In that case, you talk with parents about the prodigal years and enduring and the struggle with that and how challenging it can be. And do not give up hope, because I'm a firm believer that a lot of kids just, they get caught in that. There's a freedom at dad's house. There's no rules, no boundaries. I can do what I want. And it's cool. And it's fun. And I get away with it all. And they come full circle eventually. Now, when and how long it takes, I don't know. But a lot of kids come full circle. Oftentimes they're in their early 20s, or they got married and they had their own kid, and all of a sudden they're rethinking life. And that's when they begin to fall back into the arms of grace and that environment and the values that mom taught. And so sometimes you have to say the hard thing of, hold on, don't quit, mom. Keep pressing in, keep speaking to your child's life. Realize what's going on here, just do the best you can, and let's trust and pray that they come full circle. That's the hard thing you have to say that they don't want to hear. Kind of the net of that as we close is, when you're parenting between households, any one parent has less parental power than they had if you were all in one household. I mean, when you're a couple and you're parenting as a team, you have power. When you're a divided couple in different homes, each of those homes has less power. Now we add another adult, a step parent, that's a third adult. Now we add another one, that's a fourth adult. Everybody has less influence. And one of the hard realities is you also have less influence regarding spiritual things. And so we do the best we can. Pray that grace brings them around. Let me say a prayer, and we'll wrap up. I'll hang around for a few minutes if you have other thoughts or questions. It's been an honor to have you guys here in our building, and we're just glad to get to know you a little bit. And if we can serve you in any way, let us know. Chad, Aaron, do either one of you guys have something you need to? Yeah. Let me pray, and then you can finish up. God, thanks for our time today, and I just ask a blessing on all these people that are engaged in ministry and building your kingdom. We all need your wisdom, God. We need help and support. We only have so much energy and time. So as we make choices and decisions about where we're going to spend our time, I pray that you would help us to do that. Help us to not be afraid of the tough conversations with kids that we know are pulled in different ways. Help us to enter that world, to really be a voice of hope for them and to make a difference. And I just pray a blessing over all the families under our care that we're working with, that you would strengthen them, God, and bring them closer to you, because we know that it's through the home that you are made known. So for your glory, that's the prayer this morning. In the name of Jesus, I pray. Amen.
Thank you to Ron for doing a great job. And again, for those of you, maybe this is your first time here at Central Arkansas Youth Worker Training event, our speakers, for all the ones we've done, for the ones we keep doing, Ron's not getting paid for this. We're not, he's not asking for a speaking fee or anything like that. This is all 3 hours of his time that he's taking out. We really appreciate that. Great stuff, huh? Mm-hmm. Thank you for being here. We will continue to do this. We do it kind of quarterly. That's not really right. 3 times a year. Semi-annually, something like that. Trimesters. We'll do another one in the spring. We're constantly looking for, what topics are you wrestling with, are you dealing with, are you interested in? This is meant to be hyper-local training for hyper-local workers using the resources we have around the Central Arkansas area. So most of the time with Chad, I sit down and go, all right, what are you doing? What am I dealing with? Maybe it doesn't need a little bit too. But these ideas more and more are coming from y'all. So if you have an idea, you're welcome to tell one of us, or a lot of you, if you registered on the website, if you got an email from me as we kind of led up to this, you can email me right back and say, hey, here's something that, we'd love to hear more about. So, I think that's kind of all. Anything you'd add to that?
No, I mean, though we're primarily youth and family pastors, we've had 3 seminars so far, and we've had 3 very different ones, and all 3 have been at different locations. And that's not intentional, it's just like Aaron said, we want to encourage and sharpen one another. And whether church staff, children's ministry,